Hello, everyone. Happy Monday. Here we are again. Hopefully, I can't believe we're 19 days in January already. So, hopefully, it's been a good year so far. Hopefully, your resolution of mental health and trying to be better is why you've come to this channel here. My name is Swizz. Welcome to another edition here of Level Up Mental Health as we approach our topic here of two solid ones that we will review here tonight. Like I said, just a couple adjustments that we'll be doing. I know I didn't do a game last week. There's just been a lot of craziness kind of going on here. So looking to hopefully do that this week. I still think I'm gonna go with Max Payne, just to kind of do a character analysis there for that. I know it may not be a mental health esque per se in that sense, but there is some mental health themes to review in the game. I haven't played myself. I believe I have it all set up. Based on the community vote that I got, that I polled. That's the vote for that. So we'll see how that goes. So I'm hoping to maybe start it tonight. We'll see how it goes. Otherwise, I'm just gonna be doing the two topics here tonight, and they will be posted the next 2 days on YouTube at my YouTube page here at Level Up Mental Health Gaming. For those that are looking to search that on that screen there. Okay, so let's get to our topic here tonight. And like I said, the main one that we're going to be reviewing here is defeating depressive thoughts. So obviously with this, it can be a very common and difficult endeavor, right? When you're trying to experience these particular thoughts, and it makes it very hard to try to combat them, right? The feelings of sadness, low energy, kind of that lack of motivation, all can also impact other areas like our ability to sleep, right? So, one of the things I always like to talk about for the way that we think about things and the way that things occurred, I usually like to view it as I'm more of kind of that behavioral view perspective with it. And the reason I say that is that, yes, I do believe genetics kind of exacerbates or kind of can lead to certain kind of symptoms for someone to have. But I also really believe that the environment plays a huge role in that sense as well. Where as a child, you're kind of growing up and you don't really know the philosophies of life, right? You don't know kind of the differences for right and wrong, and as you're trying to learn to be a human being, a lot of kind of behaviors that are going to be brought onto you really just kind of shape you into the type of person that you're going to be, right? Again, just a theory, just kind of perspective associated with that. But as you kind of go here and you think about it, it would make sense in the sense of like, okay, so if I'm growing up and being told I'm a failure every single day, I'm going to view myself as a failure, right? Like, where else is that information coming from unless it is from that environment, right? Maybe from a parent or guardian that's having an impact. And that's why, I always emphasize the behavioral implications in our childhood development because it really does have a profound effect. And as we kind of go through this and look at the themes, you'll see the impact that it can have, right? So let's open up our handout here and we'll see what we're dealing with. All right, so there we are. We're at defeating depressive thoughts, and let's take a gander at what we got here. So, like we said here, again, the one thing I always like this kind of section here when it's talking about the filtering system because it's a good kind of visualization to think about it, right? So, and a lot of it can be attributed to, especially if we're in that depressive kind of mind state, right? Mind state, where we're not trying to have kind of these negative thoughts, right? But if it's, let's say if it is a depressive disorder that's kind of impacting our ability to think logically or clearly, it's going to influence the way we're going to view these things, right? So the thought is kind of occurring, it may be kind of filtered in a way that is, it's kind of like those the metaphor of the rose kind of tinted color glasses. So think of it as kind of the blue tinted color lenses, right? That makes it hard for us to kind of see it. So if a thought occurs and we're experiencing kind of that depression feeling or mindset, we're going to view everything in just kind of excuse me, kind of that particular perspective, right? So our goal, for us is when that does happen is to be able to kind of recognize that and try to pinpoint these themes and utilize kind of strategies to help us ensure we can combat that, right? Now, obviously, this is easier said than done, right? Especially if it's something that's been, as I like to say, again, from a behavioral standpoint, been conditioned to you over and over and over and over again. We have to kind of break that thought cycle, right? And being able to do that is no easy feat. So a lot of it, there is repetition. A lot of it is being able to have kind of that kind of practice, and it's going to be take time. It's going to take patience in order for that to occur. And the more we're able to identify these particular themes, the more we're able to kind of recognize when they may arise, and especially if there's a particular trigger that's going to lead us into these themes, it's going to help us to be really kind of proactive at trying to combat them. And that's the ultimate goal here, right? Identify the theme, develop kind of a response, and just repeat it over and over and over again is the ultimate goal in game that we're just trying to work on here, right? So, what they're saying too for here, kind of with the filter, is that if we are experiencing that kind of quote unquote depression filter that's activated, we're going to seek out the information that's going to support our beliefs related to it, right? And it makes sense, right? If you're experiencing kind of that perspective of depression, any kind of information that we may take may be skewed towards it, or maybe kind of misinterpreted into the cone of that depression, right? So the goal, as we said, is that we're trying to recognize that these are not absolute truths, that these are just thoughts in our mind that may have been conditioned from our past, that may have been influenced by those kind of discussions by those parents, guardians, and to, again, try to counter them, right? So let's take a look at some of these depressive themes and see if any of these kind of relate to you. There's four that really just kind of have a general impact here in being able to experience kind of the depression, right? So the first one here is that worthlessness theme. So if you're having thoughts such as you're not smart enough, your performance is inadequate, or that's awful, you yourself are inadequate, you have nothing to offer in the world, not living up to your potential, a lot of that is related to the worthlessness theme, right? So a lot of this can occur, again, if there is particular failures, if you're growing up and a parent or guardian is telling you that that's not good enough, you're not smart, it's going to, it's never enough in that sense, right? And especially if that barking kind of had occurred in that sense towards you, the direction, the ridicule in that sense, can lead to this particular theme to be developed, right? Now moving to the second one here, the hopelessness theme. Don't have what it takes to change, going to suffer forever, shouldn't even try because nothing will change anyway, right? Now what's interesting about this is you could take that same sort of, influence. Let's say if there is emotional abuse kind of growing up in a household, an individual can take it into the worthlessness theme and or take it into the hopelessness theme here, where there's thoughts associated with going to suffer forever, should even try because nothing will change anyway, especially if it's been repeated over and over and over again. What is there to kind of, imagine that a good is going to happen, right? So it's interesting with this too, because especially for the hopelessness theme, where sometimes you're just having like a super really bad day, right? Like one thing's happening and another thing's happening, it's just going on and on and on, right? And it feels like this day is never ending, and every bad thing that could happen is happening. And that's where that really just kind of continues to validate that depressive thinking, right? It's like, well, nothing's going to change because this is happening now. What's to say it's not going to happen tomorrow, right? And that's where we're trying to counter that, because again, yes, we don't want to kind of fluff it up and say, oh no, that will never happen. Like, ultimately the step back is like, it is life, right? But we also want to recognize that there's another possibility in the sense where, well, maybe tomorrow will be a better day, right? And if it is a shitty day, maybe the next day will be better, right? So being able to kind of take that step back is important to kind of recognize that, because again, the more that we're able to know that, hey, this might be a theme that I'm kind of going through, that this is kind of clouding my ability to view other perspectives, the better we are at being able to kind of use those skills to manage it, right? So that's a hopelessness theme. The helplessness theme, I'm helpless to change, the discomfort I feel, I can't do anything right, I'll never be independent from others, I don't know how to do anything, and when I try, I fail. Again, a lot of this is kind of related as well too. And again, same kind of trauma that could have occurred as well too. Especially if you feel you've tried new things over and over again, and it's not the success that you're waiting for. Doesn't necessarily have to be from kind of the parents' emotional abuse in that sense, but just kind of saying in general, if things are kind of going out and you're doing this multiple tasks and it's not working out, this is where this theme can develop, right? And the last one here, the self-blame theme, everything bad happens is my fault. So again, you can have a combination of one or multiple of these themes here, but I think it's important too to kind of recognize if you feel you resonate with any of these, right? So how do we examine them? Well, let's see what we can look at, especially if we know whether it's a depressive thought or a functional thought. So if we think it's a depressive thought, which can pretty much self-handicap our beliefs and misconceptions, it creates these distortions about how we're viewing it, right? So for the thought, do we think this links with a mood of depression or exaggerated mood? Does it promote a sense of pessimism or defeatism? Does it match up the theme with helplessness? Does it generate feelings of worthlessness and self-blame? Does it interfere with your relationships, impede your ability to manage basic activities, detract you from pursuing meaningful personal goals? All in all these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 bullet points is that does it impact your functioning? Do these thoughts, these distortions, have some influence on your everyday kind of well-being? And that's where you can kind of recognize, does this happen to be the case, right? Especially if you kind of notice it over and over and over again, and in the impact they can have, you can kind of recognize, okay, is this a depressive thought, or is it kind of something else in that sense? So ask yourself these questions, right? The biggest thing I love, kind of the Socratic kind of questioning towards yourself, is being able to ask these questions here, and know that the thought that you have is not the gospel truth, is not a fact, right? I always, the classic kind of saying is that thoughts are not facts, right? Feelings are not. Thoughts kind of influence kind of those feelings, but the thoughts that you have are not always to be true in that sense. And that's where we have to ensure we're questioning it, to really just kind of take that step back and recognize, what is this thought and where is it coming from, right? That's the biggest thing, is where is this thought coming from? So let's look at functional thoughts here. This is the goal that we're trying to achieve when we're experiencing our thoughts, right? So we want to have the thoughts to make sure that they're rational, that they're factual, plausible, reasonable, and predictable. And we want to make sure to see if our thoughts promote productivity and creativity, support positive relationships, prompt accountability without necessary blame, encourage acceptance and tolerance, strength, persistence, and self-discipline, serve as a platform for conditions that propel personal growth, correlate with healthy risk-taking initiatives, link to a sense of emotional well-being and positive mental health, lead to a realistic sense of perspective, improve your career performances and opportunities, and stimulate an openness to experience and an experimental outlook. A lot of good stuff, and look at kind of the differences between these two as well with that. But just kind of define a few things. So healthy risk-taking initiatives, kind of like being able to get out of that comfort zone and be able to kind of try new things here and there. If you feel that, going back to kind of the helplessness theme, is that I don't know if I try anything, when I try, I fail. Kind of being able to take the healthy risk. Well, let's say if you're trying to do, you're trying to kind of join a new social group, whether if it's the trading card game or something like that, right? Oh, I don't know if I will be able to make these connections because, I don't know if they would like me, right? That's where the healthy risk-taking initiative comes in. It's like being able to tell ourselves, okay, we can try this, and here's what's going to happen, right? Here's kind of the result of, even if I do take this step forward, here's the impact they can have with me, right? So a lot of this is that empowerment, that self-empowerment that we're trying to do, to trying to build for ourselves. And again, as I said kind of earlier, it's hard to get to this point, right? Looking at this and you say, oh, that's easier said than done, and that's correct. being able to ensure that we can train ourselves to get to this thought process is what the ultimate goal is. We want to defeat those depressive thoughts and transition them into functional thoughts so they can have an impact and not not have the depressive thoughts influence our ability to function, right? And the last one here, direct our efforts along ethical pathways, right? So, what can we do? Well, we can start with trying to reframe the depressive thoughts. One of the things I want to emphasize is that when you are trying to reframe or trying to do any of these skills, I mentioned this a few in the sessions. It's being able to do this when you are in a kind of lesser emotional state, right? One of the things I've mentioned a few times here is that there's a skill called the DBT scale of emotional intensity. And what's important is being able to recognize where is your intensity of emotion at this time. I always like to use kind of a scaling system from 1 to 10. It helps kind of really just identify where you feel you are. So if you can rate yourself on a scale from 1 to 10, 1 being the worst, 10 being, or I'm sorry, 1 being the least intense, 10 being the most intense, where is your emotional intensity at this time, right? And if you can reflect and think about, okay, I'm in that 8 to 10 range of that intensity of emotion, doing these things like trying to reframe is not going to be impactful. You want to be able to reduce that intensity of the emotion so then you can do these strategies like reframing. Because think about it this way, if you feel you're in that emotional intense state, and depression, especially if it's related to really just having that lack of motivation, really having that difficulty of trying to kind of get up, where you're just kind of immovable and it's really just kind of this huge weight that you have on you. The goal is crisis management. So certain things like we've talked about for temperature control, trying to do progressive muscle relaxation, pace breathing, intense exercise, things like that nature. Distractions is the ultimate goal because we want to reduce that intensity so we can get to this point to do these skills here, right? So when we get to that lower number there, that below 7 range, that's when we are able to use these skills here. So let's take a look at what reframing is and how to reframe these depressive thoughts. So a thought we may have, for example, I'm not living up to my potential, that makes me worthless. And the question, again, question. Always question the thoughts for that, right? If you feel you're having a thought like this, question it. Where is it coming? Especially if this is true, how does not living up to my potential render me completely worthless, right? What is the defining things that's telling me that I am worthless, right? So the reframe is ultimately kind of being able to adjust our thought in the sense of reaching full potential is a vague idea. If I don't set a realistic expectation for myself, I won't ever feel satisfied with myself. So as you can see there, it's more that self-empowerment that we're looking for. Next one, I'm going to suffer forever. The question here, where's the factual evidence that my mood will remain constantly negative? I love this question because it's a great counter to when you have kind of that all or nothing thinking where it's always going to be forever. Well, where's the evidence to prove that it's going to remain negative, right? If you can challenge yourself to think of something good that may have happened, it automatically counteracts that thought that we have forever. It's going to happen forever. Well, here's the counter to that, because actually, hey, I found $2 in my pocket, and that's something, right? $2 richer. The reframe here, answer is there is no factual evidence that states my mood will remain depressed. That's a typo. Forever, because I cannot predict the future. Logic states that if I continue to work on myself, prioritize my mental health, and take the suggestions of my treatment team, I'm more likely to come out of my depression. Next thought here, I can't do anything right? Again, we're questioning it, right? We're automatically questioning of where's the proof? Where is the facts that you're saying that you can't do anything right? What is nothing? How do you define that? And what do you mean by right? So you're trying to clarify a lot of these vague statements here and kind of these vague themes. And the ultimate goal is to get to this reframing on that right side. I can challenge the idea that I can do nothing right by making a list of 10 things I do okay. And this could be anything like brushing my teeth, cleaning my room, taking a drive, or express my needs to my support system, right? So I always like this as well too, because a lot of the time we don't give credit for those tiny wins. And yes, it may seem small or insignificant, but being able to brush your teeth or clean the room, especially if you're experiencing really difficult intensity of depression, is a success. It is a reward, right? So recognize that and be able to tell yourself, hey, these are tiny wins that we're having, and that is doing something right. If you can do those things, then that's key. And then it kind of goes into further things here, like nothing is an overgeneralization. Blanket statements like this don't take into account individual situations. Right can mean a lot of things and be defined differently from person to person. It's impossible that all my actions are not right, right? So this is just absolutely shredded this depressive thought, and that's the ultimate goal that we're trying to do, right? Break this down. What does it mean by not doing anything right, right? How do we know that nothing is true in that sense, right? Whereas the facts to say that this has even happened, the more we challenge it, the better we will break it down. And as you can see, again, this isn't going to happen overnight. You have to do it over and over and over and over again. Even if you feel you get to the point where you question it, where you start to have that thought and you just begin to question it, you're going to make an impact. It's just going to take time. So continue to question. All right. So this is a nice little example here that we get to. You could do it for yourself. Little practice there. And kind of the last part here, reminders to yourself. Negative depressive thoughts may be automatically. You don't have to take them personally, right? This is kind of a big thing too, because again, as I said earlier, for the stream, is that a lot of the time it could just be an echo for what we've experienced growing up, right? Maybe there was a particular person in our life that really just kind of shouted this or had spread this kind of idea and theme consistently in our mind, and that's what we're interpreting it, right? So knowing again that it's essentially our brain has been conditioned, right? Our brain has been conditioned to think this way, so we have to essentially rewire our entire brain. Automatic depressive thinking will arise from time to time, especially following the twinge of mild depression, and negative mood swing, or having an unpleasant experience. Again, that's just kind of how it is. It's not to say we're going to eliminate depression completely, but recognize that it's going to happen again. As long as we're able to kind of recognize that we can swing back, is the big thing. Disengage from believing depressive thoughts, thinking habits are just that, habits. Putting my depressive thoughts into perspective, separating the rational from irrational, and challenging my depressive thoughts to do habit I can create with practice. Again, that's the goal we want to get to. So, solid discussion here with this topic. Again, this is one of my favorites because it is very impactful. Being able to, especially with the depressive thoughts, can be very kind of common. So the more that we challenge it, and the more that you take the time and the patience for yourself, and the biggest thing is give yourself those little wins. It's going to lead to that ability to defeat those depressive thoughts. Reframe as best as you can, question as much as you can, and you might be surprised what that outcome is going to be. Okay? So, hopefully you like this first topic here. I'm going to take a little break, and then I will return for our second topic here about being mindful of our emotions here. Kind of, we're going to talk about more so of a physical kind of response. So, see you in a bit.